And I guess just to finish the question as an invitation to Josh, the community here is really pursuing a strategy of systems in the service of systems literacy, capitalizing in systemic sensibility, and trying to build systems thinking and practice capability. And I'd invite you and Future Earth and your colleagues to think how that program could become central to your bridging activities and capacities.
Thank you for that comment. Any feedback, comments?
You want to start?
Or we can take the next question. Okay, we'll take the next question then. Saw a hand back here, black shirt.
This society has as its goals and objectives, since the founders, the transfer of models, theoretical models between disciplines, and the scientific, supposedly, presentation of a general theory that could be used in lots of different circumstances. And so, Joshua, when you finished with the, if I may quote your phrases, portable knowledge and silver buckshot, I was quite excited on the similarities between that last thing you stated as goals. Does Future Earth, you know, you showed the different groups that are funded and in Future Earth. Does it have one for the general systems knowledge base that could serve both sustainability and Future Earth efforts?
Yeah, that's a great question. So there are two that are probably worth exploring, and neither are probably perfect for it as of yet. I would say that the other thing is that Future Earth is very much a container at this point. It's only as good as the stuff we put in it, and that comes from these communities. The Sustainability Transformations community, which is the Knowledge Action Network focused on this, comes primarily from the social sciences, but we've been pushing them to reach deeply out into the other disciplines to create that linkage. They're very active. They were funded primarily, a number of projects were funded through the International Social Sciences Council. They've been very engaged going forward. They are a good starting point, and we absolutely need that transformations to do the evidence base for that transformations to come out of theory that is generated by a group like this, right? So fundamentally there. The other is on the data and information side. So we have a data and knowledge information working group, which is trying to do sort of how do we provide an integrated approach to knowledge generation and sharing, and do that in a way that allows linkages between disciplines more effectively. So one is sort of subject-based and the other is sort of technology-based. Both of those need pushes, but I think there are opportunities in both places. It's a great question.
I'm going to go to the back, first of all, the far back, and then we'll come up front here.
Thank you. For Josh, does this great project have developing a program for the most powerful energy, that is love? Mm. And if not, are you interested on one?
Yeah. So I mean, the way I think of this is, I mean, I've been talking with some other folks about, you know, what's a better way to think? Like, I think about opportunities in this space, and there's a thing called 100 and Change that comes out of MacArthur Foundation every 3 years. Just started this year, which is really trying to get organizations like Future Earth and others to think really big. What would you do with $100 million? What would you do very, very differently? How would you transform whole systems? And one of the ideas that has come out of that is to really think about thinking very differently about the valuing and values of nature, how we integrate. So, and this was done strategically through IPBES, where we've opened a door. I was. Some of us engaged in IPBES in that process of understanding how to rethink not just the sort of what we get from nature, but how our values of nature need to change, gets at that. This sort of idea of we have a value system that externalizes so much of the world we need to internalize. This is as close as we get to something around, bringing love into the equation, I think, currently. And I do think that the way you're framing it, I mean, the work we've done through IPBES starts that dialogue, because it's all the way from Gaia and Mother Earth out to, ecosystem services and much more technical terms for this connection between people and the planet. I think we need to engage major funding organizations in deepening that relationship, and that's one initiative that we're pursuing on that, or we're exploring on that space. Would love to talk further about it. It's just this big so far.
Right. There was a question up front here.
Well, thanks a lot. And I would like follow up, as you said, science as a service. Basically, I describe to that. The problem only is there's many, somebody said science is major, rather identifying dead ends in our thinking. And only 1 out of 10 or so wins. And that's the problem, that you really can't look at the service. And secondly, we probably will have some ideas of services which we just have to tell the world, because nobody knows that this could be a useful service. I think that's part of the funding and the justification problem.
I totally agree with that comment, that basic science is fundamental service to society, and that's been demonstrated throughout the history of science. And I think there are some that are saying that Future Earth is trying to change the way science is done, which is total hogwash. Like, that's not the job of Future Earth, and really, it's not the job of any organization at all. What we do need to do is increase the impact of science on policy and decision making without changing the fundamental sort of service of science to society, which has remained, there for, it doesn't need changing, not that part.
We're going to come over to the right side here, or left side to you, then the center, and then the back.
Hi, I'm Thomas. I'm from Hong Kong. Thank you for this wonderful ideas sharing. So I just have a comment for Bruce. I see that your elements in the holistic theory, I think you have got lots of things in there, as we talked about yesterday, the 5 element systems, which come from the because of the differentiation of the senses, which you talk about as well. So I think the openness is like the wood system, the closure is like the metal system. The thermodynamics is something like it's the natural destruction of the system. That's the normal thermodynamics. And the other opposite is what you said about the organism. This the life is actually what system theory called the organizational force, which is the opposition of the thermodynamics. That's how we maintain the system. And I agree with Ray about the consciousness. The consciousness is, a better word will be the connection, which is the water system, which is like the environment. And then in the end, you have got the narrative legitimacy, which is to talk about the fairness, the peace, and harmony between, which is the way to actually to maintain the system, which is the fire element in the 5 system theory. So you have got it there. And the last one is about the good things that we should do to maintain the system. If we do not do that, then it's the opposite, which is the force of the thermodynamics, which actually making the system destroy much faster than it would be. Just this comment. Thank you.
Thank you. I had great confidence you would be able to deconstruct that whole thing. And so let's get together and write that down. Thank you.
Okay, there was a question up front, and then we're going back to the back, gentleman in the back here.
Kia ora tātou, Kepa Morgan, University of Auckland, New Zealand. So great presentations, thank you. One of the things that struck me, found it really interesting, there's an assumption that these solutions, these solutions require the adoption by the whole of the globe. Yeah. So Einstein said, I think, that you can't solve problems with the thinking that created them. So I want you to just reflect on that, and then just put in a context of, if this fails, what does it mean for Indigenous peoples? How are Indigenous peoples involved? And what does it mean for the New World Order?
So when you say this fails, I'm assuming you're talking about this attempt to focus scientific capacity around the world on major societal challenges. Well, I think one way it could fail is to not include Indigenous knowledge in the rubrics by which we value knowledge, right? If we take a Western view of what is appropriate and we try and impose that through a colonial model, which has been all too common, we will fail. We will end up, and one of the things, so the Colorado Hub is charged with working with our African offices to build an African vision of the future of sustainability science, essentially, for Africa. That's not something that I can say anything about, really, with legitimacy, right? And I think coming in with that humility and being able to sort of, my role being to help articulate, to help convene and listen and bring an Africa vision of sustainability science, and really helping them project their definition of what science and research is to the rest of the world, and actually even allowing groups within Future Earth to say, no, we're actually not a research platform per se, we want to call it knowledge for action or knowledge action, or there's a whole debate in that space about how much we're in the knowledge space and how much we're in the action space. And of course that makes people uncomfortable on both sides, right? Most of our engagement committee says these scientists aren't moving fast enough, and all of our scientists are saying these engagement people don't understand science. And so, even in the organization, there's tremendous back and forth that creates sort of mixed messaging. And so getting to know each other and getting to respect each other across disciplines and geographies, I think, is sort of the essential first step in this process. And then creating the time to allow the process to come from the regions, so that it's much easier to just top down it, right? Oh, I got some money from this foundation and I'm just going to tell you how to spend it because I'm worried about my foundation. That's the model we've been using in conservation around the world for the last 40 years. And so we see where that gets us. But it is more expensive, and it does take more time and a lot more work with donors to be able to say, look, I'm going to take your money and I'm going to give it to them. I don't know what they're going to do with it, right? That's the sort of consciousness we need to engage. If we fail, I think it has huge consequences. The same way if IPBS fails, it'll have huge consequences. And if we if we don't work together with that organization, we'll both have limited impact. So I think there's lots to be done there.
Two more questions. I've seen one in the back here, a gentleman with his hand raised right now, and then actually I guess we'll take three. The lady in front of the question, and then John.
Does that work? Hello. Good morning. Thank you for the inspiring talk. My name is Louis Klein. I come from Berlin, European School of Governance. And just for us as an audience here, we shall watch ourselves not to slide into a group of scientists anonymous. So please, if you... Does that work better?
Yeah.
Oh, slightly. Yes. So please, if you ask questions, give your name and your affiliation, so that I mean as a courtesy to the presenters, so that they do not speak to anonymous scientists, nameless voices. So that's the first point. Second point is science is critical, or it is pointless. And in all our debates and discussions, we haven't raised the question about power. We haven't raised the question about what is behind all that. And we know power is all about the ruling narratives. And that is based on answering the question, who has the weapons and who has the money? We know that science has always been successful and impactful when the military paid for it. Manhattan Project, for example, big science and technology. That is when big money comes in and funds what we see there. And so the critical question now to Future Earth is, do you have money? Do you have substantial money? Do you have a substantial backing? Or are you just another well-underfunded playground for draining energy out of global, out of the relevant discourses?
Right, so that's a great question. And there's a number of ways to answer that. I think, first of all, I mean, the sad truth to start with is that when Future Earth was established from the Global Change Programs, and when it was given this double mandate of maintaining everything those programs did and to creating this step change in science and the impact on society, it was not given a step change in resources from the governments that created the Global Change Program. So that's issue one. That said, on the sort of other side of the ledger, the Belmont Forum, for all its warts, is the best international transdisciplinary funding source we have right now. They leverage 7-to-1 their international dollars, so they're putting hundreds of millions into that space every year. And they in some senses pushed Future Earth into existence because they needed a boundary organization. because they needed a way of encouraging scientists to work together and with societal partners so that when they put money on the table, we can use it more effectively. And they're creating their dollars around their calls for us to help organize those communities. So when we do food, water, energy, and urban systems, it's not just a bunch of bright lights doing their own work. We're bringing them together, all of those bright lights, to see about the emergent properties of the different teams. That's usually not possible from normal science communities. If we can use that and leverage that, my role is primarily to align funding organizations, to talk to USAID and say, look, you can do all this great work in developed countries, but the Belmont Forum doesn't have any of those developed countries in it. So now we're doing science in these countries and aid in those countries. That doesn't make any sense. Let's align that. To then take the Wellcome Trust and say, and work with their team working on health and saying, planetary health is the thing that you've decided is going to be important. Let's align that with NIH and other groups that are now increasingly recognizing small bit at NIH, but they are starting to recognize the importance of this issue and bring that to table. A lot of the work is funding alignment, and I guess the last most positive thing is there's an increasing need. We're on a trajectory of we really got to do things differently, and that has produced. I've had a number of organizations come and just knock on our doors, which I've never had in previous places, to say, how can we help? It takes a while to get from the how can we help to here's an actual way to do it, and I am hoping that once we get a few on board, others find it more attractive, and we can actually become what you want us to be. It's not going to happen by one person alone, though. We're going to need everyone to help. Yeah.
Okay, I'm sorry. We were going to go to one other question, but John's indicating we're running out of time here. We'll save them for later. Thank you, the rest of the plenary speakers here, Josh, and for Bruce. Thank you for taking time to chat today. Feel free to grab any of us in the hallways. I think there's a coffee break coming up. Is that right? Is there a coffee break coming up?
Yeah, coffee break.
Yes, yeah. I'm ready for some coffee.
Okay, remember, please.